Good afternoon. Welcome back to another episode of UOWD On-Air. Today, I'm very excited to have with us a distinguished guest. We have with us the Executive Director of the Manara Center in Abu Dhabi, UAE, joining us today. She's the Executive Director for that Center for Coexistence and Dialogue. The center is chaired by His Excellency Dr. Ali Al-Naimi, and has recently, of course, been important to us, the University of Wollongong, because some of our students participated in an annual competition. We came second place, I think. Yeah. So we're very excited to have you with us today, Bakhita. And we also have with us, supporting my conversation about tolerance and coexistence, is Dr. Michael Mallory, who's the program director for all the media programs that we have here at Wollongong. And also we have with us a former student, I believe now a graduate, looking to pursue her postgraduate studies abroad, Nauren Asif. So welcome to all of you. My name is Feras Hamza. I'm the head of the School of Humanities here, and shall be kickstarting this conversation today about the subject of tolerance. So, my first impression is that and I wonder what you all think, is that the word tolerance is a bit tricky. It does suggest a kind of, people have said this, of course, in the past, so perhaps this is kind of pursuing old conversations. There is a sense in which tolerance is a kind of minimum threshold we expect. I just want to start with just language, because I think it's always important. Bakhita, what do you think is the meaning of tolerance? Does it go beyond just tolerating from a distance, but disagreeing? Because it's a very important currently political debate in Europe about minorities, about extremist groups, about undemocratic groups actually, and whether they should have a right to exist. And so tolerance is an interesting concept, and I wonder what your thoughts are about that word and how it comes to represent your portfolio actually, and what your agenda is.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for having us. It's an absolute honor to be here with one of our ambassadors of coexistence as well. In regards to defining and the threshold for social inclusion, truly, what we promote at Manara is not necessarily agreeing with one another, but having the space and the mental capacity to agree to disagree. But still, we can coexist with one another. And we can, based on that, we can create conversations, have the space for dialogue, have the space to look at the other person that is so different than you, that behaves, worships, lives differently than you, but having that sense of value to accept them as they are and agree to disagree with one another and see where that conversation leads.
Okay. And do you think that tolerance in itself is more easier to achieve in certain kinds of societies, certain kinds of contexts? I mean, there are some studies that suggest that, urban contexts where people are naturally mixed, culturally mixed, come from different might be easier to achieve. And we know that the UAE is very much about the urban context and has some of the most amazing kind of urban achievements in the world. Do you think that's come easier somehow in the UAE, or does it still require people to drive the agenda?
That's an interesting question for you to ask, because it is true in some societies where it is more culturally diverse, it's easier to get along, it's easier to agree to disagree. But in some societies, we see conflict and crises happening on a daily basis because of that. Tolerance, coexistence, social inclusion is a holistic approach that requires all segments of society to take a role in this. And that's what we believe in at Manara, that there is an individual responsibility to each section of society, to each individual, to promote these values. And we have been privileged and lucky in the United Arab Emirates to have a government, have the foundation laid out for us, and have such a diverse community of different peoples from different backgrounds, ethnicities, and religions. And it does require a push from the government, as in, as we see with the government of the United Arab Emirates, they've created the Ministry of Tolerance, the Abrahamic Family House. There's a law, the federal law number, if I'm not mistaken, if my memory doesn't fail me, federal law number 2 of 2015, where it is actually a crime to hate on someone, to spew venomous words of hatred against someone else, for their ethnicity, for their color, for their background. And these foundations have been laid in place for us, and we are actually lucky to have them. And based on those, different initiatives have been created. And one of them is our center, to promote these values of coexistence. And one thing I always mention that is what differs from a society that has diversity and they're in conflict, and another society that has diversity and they are living in social cohesion, is that value of agreeing to disagree, is realizing that peace is not exclusive. It's not exclusive for one group. It's an inclusive endeavor, and it's an active and not a passive endeavor.
Does the Manara Center have an educational arm? Because I'm always struggling with the responsibility of educational institutions to actually, to graduate students that at the end of, perhaps not at the beginning of their journey at undergrads, but perhaps towards the end when they're maturing and they're realizing that there's responsibility lying ahead and so on. I'm challenged to try and it not kind of, you can't do it overnight. It's I think if you might agree with me, it's an ambitious kind of project to transform a society into a tolerant one. But what are some of the educational, do you think, responsibilities there, and what role does the center have in pursuing those?
Well, thank you for asking that question. I'm always an enthusiast to talk about our center and what we do. So just a history for the viewers that don't know about the Manara Center. We were established in 2023. And in a year and a half, we have managed to create partnerships with universities over 9 countries, 12 cities, and our impact has reached over 500,000 and counting. We do have an educational arm. One of our pillars, we have a few pillars. One is research, one is education, and one is conflict resolution through dialogue. And the last one is partnerships. And based on the pillar that we have created in regards to education, we created the Manara Youth Coexistence Initiatives. And basically what we do is we find universities from around the globe. We have universities in Morocco, Nigeria, Kyrgyzstan, India, Pakistan, the United Arab Emirates, Azerbaijan, and Israel as well, where we ask the universities to bring forth their top students, whoever is willing and capable, to bring ideas in regards to coexistence. Either that was media campaigns, research projects, partnerships, initiatives, and we let the students get creative with it. What we do is we give them a voice. We give them a platform to speak out. Because what happens with youth, and I believe that happened with my youth, and I think every generation of youth actually feels this, they've always been told by authority figures, by governments, by their professors, by their universities, by their parents, by everyone, how they should behave and how they should react to the world today. And what we do is we take a radical approach. And this is based on a Harvard study that was done, which states positive messages are more heard and digested if it comes from your peers rather than from an up-down approach.
I see, okay.
So what we do is we tell the students, bring on your best ideas, media campaigns, research projects, to foster community, to foster coexistence within your own communities. We don't have influence over them. We just head them to the right direction. And they make the change they want to see happen within their own community. They create the future that they want to see within their own community. We support them. We help them with resources. We provide them a network, and we push them to create that project as well.
Are these, sorry to interrupt you, are these generally at the university level, these children, or are they school?
University
students?
levels, university students.
Do you think, the reason I asked was, do you think there's an age at which, young people are very pliable and flexible, and if you catch them, then you can really transform things, as opposed to it becoming too late and people become hardened in their beliefs and attitudes and they don't want to change? We know that there's all sorts of studies that show, they even diversify by gender, like, the women versus men, who's more tolerant, who's not, and they do it by age. So I'm wondering whether that's a key critical demographic actually for your project.
It is. Youth are the future, and
I've heard you say that at the competition. That was very important to highlight.
The more the person grows older, the less they are capable of change, and youth, this is their future. They get to shape their future on their own. That's why we target university students. And university students have that ambition, have that fire in them to make a change. And I believe this is a thing that is happening globally. And we see it more and more. So it has been happening in history where youth take charge to create change.
That's right.
And we see it more and more globally as we are more connected. They have that fire within them to make a change. They lack that trust from authority figures for them to make the change, and they take it within their own hands. And what we do, we just give them the microphone. We give them the platform. Tell us, what do you want to see? We need to learn from you.
Very refreshing, I think. And I very much appreciated Dr. Ali Naimi's introductory remarks about, he apologized.
He did. He said,
I thought that was very kind of refreshing and intelligent way of saying, look, we haven't done a good job. Over to you. So on that note, I'm just going to move over to Ren for a minute, because you're in the midst of it. You're the demographic we're talking about. You took part in the competition, part of the team that won second place. You've studied media. I want you to put all of this together for me. What are your reflections on this issue of coexistence? What do you think are the challenges? What do you think are the opportunities actually in your field as a media student?
Well, that's a big load for, I guess, one person to take on. But I guess it's like what Ms. Bakhita previously mentioned, which is that I guess the youth does shoulder a lot of responsibility of what the next world is going to look like. And I think for the most part, when it comes to things like tolerance and feelings of empathy, this is something that I've noticed as someone who is in the midst of it, not just as somebody who was actively preparing and creating this project, but was also just like a regular kid who's on social media and seeing all of these things unfold. It's a responsibility that a lot of people are ready to take on nowadays, actually, which is quite refreshing. It's incredibly motivating, actually, because the world as we know it has obviously changed. Maybe not for all of the better, but regardless of whatever negativity that we are facing in terms of intolerance or discrimination, people are ready to challenge it. So that's great. This is something that when I took on the project of Rufescent that I really wanted to bank on and be like, okay, like people don't just want to sit back and see things happen to them anymore. Nobody wants to be another passenger in this massive train ride of negativity. You don't just want to sit back and watch like news feeds telling you like, oh, people are dying here or people are being affected here. People want to actively be a part of change, whether that's just posting something online or being there on the front lines by campaigning or being part of like organizations. I think all of this started to unfold around COVID-19 is actually when I saw a lot of people my age take to the front lines. It's also what made me want to go into media as well, because I liked how people were using something that was just seen as a hobby before and revolutionizing it into being this like massive medium for change that was affecting things on a global scale. Like I saw policies and laws being affected just because so many people my age were taking to social media and being like, hey, like this sucks, change it. And they did change it because so many people were willing to speak up about it. And I think studying the behind the scenes part of it, of why people wanted this change or why this change was necessary, was also really interesting. I used all these ideas that I had as a media student when it came to creating Rufescent, which was that people didn't just want to be a vegetable when it came to consuming content anymore. And I did that by like not just by making Rufescent something that you can consume. Rufescent became something they could be a part of. Yes.
Do you want to say something about Rufescent, just for those listening that are not
like an
sure what you're
introduction?
talking about? This is Ren talking about what started out. I guess it started out as the final year project, and then it grew into something that competed for at the Manara Center. But just say something about that, just for our listeners' sake.
Okay.
And who Rufescent is? Why is he called Rufescent? Is it a he?
No, it's not. Rufescent is Rufescent means tinged with red.
So it is an attitude, or is what's it trying to capture?
I guess it's trying to Oh, when I say it like that, it sounds quite negative.
Okay.
Rufescent is, well, it was originally just the name of a graphic novel, because the novel is quite sad. If you really read it, it's not. We didn't really want it to give off a false sense of positivity. Not all the characters have happy endings, but we gave them realistic, hopeful endings, I can say. So we chose Tinged with Red because the novel actually starts off quite bleak, and the color that we use to symbolize hope and revolution happening in the novel was red. So hope quite literally starts being shown in the novel when the color red also starts to show in the novel, so tinged with red. And we decided to go with red because a lot of the times the color that's used to showcase violence and these negative attitudes in media is red.
Is red, yeah.
So we wanted to change the narrative on it. So Rufescent then went on to become this huge campaign as well. And we have documentary, we have research papers, we have an animated short film, the graphic novel, merchandise. It became really huge, and I'm really proud of it.
Michael, I want to turn to you as somebody who reads heavily on theory in media, which is very important, I think, because they give you kind of macro perspectives, allow you to stand back and think, reflect over longer periods of historical time. What do you think are the opportunities and the challenges with media platforms? Because I think Ren was just saying you don't want everything to be kind of look rosy and so on, and everything is, everything now is kind of cosmetically kind of it's manicured. It's kind of the content's always like that, but there is also disturbing content. So your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think first, thanks for everyone for being here again. But I think, the nature of the media today, I think it's good and bad at the same time, because I think with everything with social media and how empowering that can be for young people and how that can give a voice to young people and how we're not only dependent on the narrative by a few media companies around the world telling us what's happening, what to think, and how to think. Now we have access to thousands and thousands and millions of voices and millions of perspectives and millions of pieces of media that are coming at the same time. But when this has happened, this opened up for everybody. So now we can get all of the positive, but then we can also get all of the negative and all of the hate at the same time. And we haven't yet we haven't yet built a kind of system to allow for access for everybody, but then to somewhat, I guess, control the narrative that's happening there, because that's again that kind of runs counter to what social media and media is supposed to be today, which is open for everybody and gives everybody a voice. But we can't really give everybody a voice if we tell some people you can't say that. Again, that's and maybe we're at the stage where we're trying to figure out how can we have the best of this situation. Because I definitely think it's better than in the past, where you get all of your information from one channel at 6 o'clock and that's it, and that you learn about the thing that's happening in a certain country, and it's from that perspective, and that's it. There's no alternatives. There's no way to find out anything else. I don't know necessarily what's going to come. How we're going to resolve this point where we're at now, though, Because one thing that we were talking about, discussing briefly earlier, was that it seems like now, and Ren can probably speak a little bit to this, that the negativity is louder, especially online, than the positivity. The negativity is easier to find.
Interesting.
And it seems to be that the youth, I mean, that's just what is getting into your feed and getting into your mind and getting into what you see. And it's becoming normalized to see those things.
Mm. So I mean, your sense of how things are positive and negative, are those things actually correlated in the sense that just as much as it becomes more challenging to control and to try and interpret content? I think I'm interested in the challenges of the classroom. I mean, how much control do you have to exercise to kind of, I guess, instruct students in the art of interpretation? Because, they, after all, not all content is worthy of kind of serious kind of consideration, but then it is out there, and there's a lot of it. So is that a life challenge in teaching media classes?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a challenge. It's not only a challenge in the classroom, but I think it's a challenge before the classroom and after the classroom.
Because it's continuous. And
well, I mean, because when the nature of the media production and consumption changed, in the past we would be, again, turning on to the 6 o'clock news. You get the Walter Cronkite, these long-term news people who are, you trust them. The media as a pillar of trust was there. And it's not that it's not there, but now there's so much information out there that now we, the consumers, have to be the ones to determine if the content is believable and trustworthy. Whereas before, we would trust the channel or the organization to be giving us accurate, correct information.
And of course, with AI now
it's even more.
Content is even more challenging to assess. Do you find... Sorry.
I was just going to say, so now it's our responsibility. Now it's the people's responsibility.
That's very correct, yeah.
The kids' responsibility from when they first get online, when they're 4 years old, like they can get anything. And how do they know what is right and wrong and positive and negative and what they should be acting like or believing or thinking like, and I don't think they have the skills to do that at that age.
Interesting. What are your views on this? So what's your reflection, Bakhita, on this challenge?
It is quite a challenge to, there is a sense of lack of trust from authority figures, media personalities, the media outlets themselves recently, more so recently than before in regards to what news they're supposed to consume, what news they're supposed to believe. And I agree on that point. And that's where education comes in. Since we've mentioned education and what our responsibilities are in the classroom, critical thinking is more than important. I remember when I was a university student, and one professor, I thank him for this, but he actually dedicated a whole classroom just for spotting fake news and how to actually do your own research to find out if this information is credible or not. And right now, it's, as Ren stated, you can't be, quote unquote, a vegetable, if I may quote you, and just passive and just receiving the information without checking the resources, without Googling it, without checking where it came from. Because right now, media outlets have an interest in mind, have an agenda in mind. And we can't be just consumers, passive consumers towards that.
Does nobody among you lament with me the fact that we're kind of throwing out the old curricula? The humanities are doing so poorly in terms of in general enrollment. They're culling them. I mean, I'm not just talking about the Middle East. I'm talking about across the world. The humanities are seen as, but they are the only subjects that really train you to or ground you in the history of who we are, in the ways that we express to each other these things. So that's literature, that's history, that's philosophy, and so on. And I feel that these building blocks, these are the things that give you the solid foundation on which you can then build the art of interpretation. You see, the problem I have, and this challenge I see, is that even checking resources, which is this like the basic thing, the sensible thing, how can you even assess how can you assess even at that level what makes sense? So I feel that the old stock curriculum that we used to want to teach and now seems dull. I mean, I teach a class on it was a time when the ministry still required general education, as you probably know. And so we had Islamic studies subjects. And I know in a lot of universities, these are not taken seriously, by which I don't mean that they don't teach authentic Islamic studies, but by which I mean that they just think of it as a kind of cultural heritage topic. There's no critical thinking really involved. And it ends up being kind of a soft theology class when it shouldn't have to be. It can be so much more. And so we try to teach a module here on Muslim societies across history, and we look at different stages of Islamic societies. And I find it very interesting that when you just show students the cultural debts that that are owed across, right, from the Greeks to the Indians to the Christians of the Near East to the Persians and back to the kind of Islamic civilization as it was Arabized, Persianized, Turkified, and so on. You get that flexibility. You think, oh, okay, well, somebody's thought of that before. I'm not that special. I'm just as special as the next phase of history. So I think, unfortunately, that all of these classic subjects that actually serve to give us perspective, which is that distance to be able to stand away and not be personally, feel personally kind of attacked or personally challenged. I lament that, and I wonder if any of you want to kind of second my voice. But
yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a challenge that we face across the university, like you said, especially in the humanities. I don't think that this type of thinking is valued today. I think it's so transactional in terms of what am I going to get that's going to help me when I'm 22 years old have the rest of my life figured out. Meaning I'm going to graduate when I'm 22. I'm going to get some job as like a marketing director, and that's going to be it for my whole life. I'm 23 and everything's set. I don't have to do anything. That university is going to give me that, and that's all. Yeah. And there's no thinking.
It is
the process of thinking has been lost in that, and I think the media plays a big role in that. In many ways, what you see, what you consume, how you consume it. You see all this success, and you think my life is about success, and my life is about how do I measure my success, and my success is measured by what do I achieve, and I achieve based off of the accolades and the title and the money, and my life is based on that. Instead of in the past, like you're talking about, our life and our value would be based off of who we know and how much we know about those around us. You know? And I think, as Bakhita was saying earlier, then the legacy that we can leave. I think the legacy that we can leave is the legacy of how do we impact people around us, and the change we can make within communities, within societies, or like you're saying, within the classroom. But now it seems like we're valued by, how much money did you have in your bank account when you died? And that's what you're going to be the most successful person ever. But I think that's just forgotten.
Well, universities are kind of, and we're part of the challenge. I mean, we're kind of assessed on our ability, how many jobs we can get students. But education surely is not just about jobs. Education for education's sake. I mean, those moments, that moment that you remember now in class, is there any way of multiplying that, making that a curriculum? Because you remembered it, but it must have been a one-off, right? It can't have been all your classes were eye-opening.
But I studied, just a background on me, I studied international relations and a master's in international law. So this was very critical in writing our research papers. And if I may say, I'm not an educator and I'm not a media personality or a media specialist, but from my perspective, from my education, international law with a specialization in defense and security, and my role as the in the Manara Center of Coexistence and Dialogue, media has been used as a war tool to polarize people, to divide people, to create hatred, to control people as well. And we need to recognize, as a collective, as people, we need to recognize that when I see this content on TikTok or on Instagram, or because that's where most people right now get their news from, I need to realize, why am I being shown this? Where is this coming from? Even now, you can easily create a news outlet, a website, and you say, like, I'm a certified credible news source. You need to check that. You need to check the history of that, check what are their interests in this. And in this region, the media war has been something not very much spoken about, but we've seen in our day-to-day engagement with social media. And we need to recognize that, because from the perspective of the Manara Center of Coexistence and Dialogue, just a single word, a single speech about how the other is so different from you can inhumanize them. You dehumanize the person that is in front of you. And that effect trickles down generations in time and throughout society. One talk on a radio in history in the 90s in a certain African country, one talk on radio where they dehumanized a certain community led to genocide. It incites violence, it incites extremism, and it begins at a personal level and then at a public level where you go on the media and speak about this, and then on a major society level. Genocide, the Holocaust, all these mass murders, all these communities that were affected were not did not result in like just one night.
In a vacuum,
It was seeded, and as a professor of history, I'm sure you realize that as well.
Do you have an optimistic view of human nature, or do you rather just not answer that question, just pursue it with a project such as the Manara Center? I mean, there are these the philosophical views that human nature is inherently flawed. So we're given to intolerance as opposed to tolerance. We have to learn how to become respectful and tolerant and deeply appreciative of others. And the part of that process is a cognitive process, metacognitive process of imagining yourself as the other. If you're not already marginalized, you kind of had the experience of being marginalized. You've seen yourself as the other. But if you're privileged, you don't see yourself as the other. So I wonder for Ren, actually, do you now consciously think of these things because of your experience, because of the competition that you took part in at the Manara Center? Do you feel that that's become part of your consciousness? Like it's something that you care about now deeply?
I do think so.
Oh, have you always been ahead of us? You've always been like much more mature in that sort of sense.
I mean, okay. I did actually think about this recently. When I was in, I think my first or second year, I had quite a nihilistic outlook on the world and media and just like everything that was going on. I didn't really think that things could actively get better, and I wasn't really taking an active role in making things better either. I was just like, just another passenger on social media. But ever since I started RUFESN and ever since I started actively taking part in bettering communities and advocating for change, and not just being active in those spheres, but also just actively looking things up and studying how to make change and how people are being impacted across the world, and taking the effort to become more empathetic. I will say I guess, fostered more hope for society. I don't really think that, it's a lost cause anymore. So I do think like the more you study what's happening and the more you study how to help, the better your outlook on things will also change. And I think this actually connects to what you said about how subjects like history and philosophy and media, English, all of these subjects actually foster that kind of thinking. I'm not sure if anybody would have seen this, but there was this conversation happening on social media like last year where all these people were talking about how, they wish that, they were taught media literacy in school, or they were taught how to, critique these subjects. And the thing is, it was taught in your English classes, but nobody was willing to listen or understand how the text should be questioned. That famous joke that's like, maybe the curtains were just blue, but no, you have to think about why the curtains are blue. But people often look down on humanities subjects just because they come across as more empathetic or more philosophical, because these things aren't seen as profitable.
Yeah, not connected to any obviously vocational pursuit. Yeah. So it's not clear how it gets used. Even though that we hear from industry all the time that they're looking for those soft skills, which are hard skills to acquire, which come from critical thinking, exposure to kind of interpersonal relationships, being able to kind of empathize, like Ren was saying. Bakhita, you didn't answer me on human nature, and I was giving you a chance just to think really if you want to answer the question, please.
It's funny you asked that, because we had the discussion just prior to this podcast. Human nature is naturally flawed, yes. But that doesn't stop you from being an optimistic person, looking at looking at the world with a optimistic lens, that you are part of this holistic system that can actually make a change. And as I said in the Manara Ambassadors of Coexistence event, change does not come from one person. Coexistence is not instilled by one person. Yes, we do have the responsibility as an individual to foster it in our family lives, in our close circles, in our sectors, whether that was in diplomacy, in education, in media. We do have that responsibility, but we work as a collective. We work as partnerships to create that change. So to answer your question is, I think it's very easy to be pessimistic.
Yeah, it's a lazier position, you want to say.
And what we stated, me and the professor and I, hope is an active endeavor. It's not a passive one. Choosing to be the change that you want to see in the world is an active endeavor. Having hope, having that, not so much of toxic positivity, because I understand that the youth right now is so sick of toxic positivity, but seeing the world for how it is and believing where you can see change. And I think Wen and her project with Rufusant showcases that. You stated the ending was not, like a Disney ending.
It wasn't a happy ending.
The purpose of it was to create some sort of empathy. It was targeted towards the youth and to create empathy for someone who is actively going through war as a refugee and being displaced, isolated. And they've done so beautifully, that just foster those emotions of empathy, to look at the other with such forgiving eyes, with such tolerant eyes as well.
I think this is, I think we all have a responsibility as a privileged, set of individuals who have had the privilege and opportunity to come to university. And I really believe that that's what university is really, that's the kind of, raison d'etre of a university, is to, make people like Ren think that the important thing is to understand. Actually, what she said is you're right. It's about understanding. It's not necessarily thinking of like being, overly optimistic in this kind of idealist manner that's kind of a bit sort of naive. But understanding actually is a lot of work, and it takes unpacking. And just like you were saying, optimism and hope is more work.
It is.
That's probably why the best conversations are those that are short and crisp, and where the audience is still with you. I know we live in an age of kind of attention deficit, so I don't want to make this podcast too long, but I do want to give you a chance to say one final thing. This could be about your perhaps aspiration for this project of tolerance or coexistence. It could be something that you're very excited about in the here and now, like a project that's happening, or it could be a renewed commitment to something in the classroom. So, Mike, I'll start with you.
Sure. I think it's related to what you were just kind of alluding to, and what Bakhita was saying, and also Ren was saying, is that these things like hope and optimism, and I'd also include things understanding, wanting to understand, media literacy. All of these things take a lot of effort, and for me, that's kind of where I see us running into the wall, because we're asking people to, if you want this to happen, you need to invest a lot more time to make this possible, and I think we're expecting a lot more out of people and out of humanity and societies to be able to do this. What I think I would like to do, or continue to try to do, is inside of the classroom. I think we just incorrectly assume that we're dealing with people who are media natives. And we use media interchangeably with digital natives. When we're dealing with the Generation Z and the next generations that follow, who have used digital media and internet their whole lives, we just sort of assume that they understand it. But we skip over the literacy part, and not literacy like how to use the device, how to make the content, how to post, how to edit, how to do all of these technical things. We're skipping over the actual understanding behind the whole engine, let's say. So I think I would like to really try to focus more on that. But then the challenge is, how do we get the people, like Ren, people like Ren, to
Mm.
want that and to see the
Mm-hmm.
hope, let's say,
Yeah.
and the necessity of that.
See the benefit of that.
Right.
I very much like that distinction that you made between the transactional ability to, just to handle the platforms and the kind of the applications, but actually to understand what's going on, the literacy at that level. Bakhita? Something you're excited about, something you look forward to in the here and now, in the short,
Actually, a message sort of to the viewers, to everyone, and I recite this message whenever I can. The Manara Center was created because we do enjoy peace and stability within the United Arab Emirates. But we have realized that to sustain this peace and stability, our neighborhood should enjoy the same peace and stability. The world should enjoy peace and stability. And as I often say, you can't have peace in your house if your neighborhood is burning down. And I realize whenever we mention peace, coexistence, social inclusion, especially with the younger generation or someone in a military field or a security field, it's often seen as rainbows and butterflies and easy work and all that. But in today's world, people that advocate for peace are cancelled, put down, sometimes killed. It's not an easy job. It's actually a hard, a very brave thing to do. And what I call upon the viewers and everyone who gets a chance to hear this is take that step of bravery. Whether you don't need to devote like an organization, you don't need to devote so much of your time, but it is within those small aspects. It is be mindful of what you consume, the words that you use, how you address the other. Those things can actually, even small, can be part of this holistic system that I was mentioning, this holistic approach to coexistence and tolerance. And I understand love has never been a popular movement. But that's what we're trying to do at the Manara Center, to create a movement, ambassadors of coexistence, a network where we can all collectively work with one another to make the change that we want to see in the world, not for ourselves, if not for ourselves, for our kids, for our grandkids, for our communities, for everyone around us.
I guess it's a way of saying we must care.
We have no brave
choice.
To care.
It's brave, courageous
to care.
Yeah. Ryan, what's your next project? What are you excited about in view of this topic that we have today?
I think what I'm excited about is going on to do my master's. Professor actually played a large part in me deciding what I wanted to do in the future, which is really interesting. Up until I started doing Rufescent, I think I had this like very set mindset that, okay, I'll go into graphic design, I'll get a corporate job, I'll get a good salary, and then I'm done. But once I started doing Rufescent and then once I started taking an active role in making change, even if it started out small with just like, the novel and doing this for like just a school project, it snowballed into something so big, and it helped me realize that, okay, I want to continue to remain in this realm of creating change and changing people's minds and opinions. So I'm really excited to go into a degree that'll not only help me continue to study subjects like these and research and understand why societies need to keep evolving and in terms of empathy and tolerance, but I'll also hopefully one day get on to take the role of an educator who'll be able to help other students who were like me, who didn't really have, I guess, that sense of hope, change their mind and be like, okay, wait, there is something in the world and I can be the one to set out and I can change it and teach themes of media literacy and empathy and all of that. So I'm really excited for that.
What's the master's program that you're hoping to pursue in terms, what is it called? Is a master's in? Are you moving towards the art world or staying in the media or education?
It is the Masters of Arts in Digital Communication and Culture at the University of Sydney.
Oh, you're going that way. Okay.
Are we going to hear from you?
My thoughts are, I think I spoke enough during the thing. Yeah, but
what are you excited for?
What I'm excited for is that I think we'll all realize very soon with AI that universities and what universities do in places like the schools of humanities are going to be even more important. I think, I spent, 2 decades now championing humanities wherever I go, whatever it be, history, music, religion, philosophy, arts, all of the things that are records of humans interacting with one another. I mean, every single one of these disciplines is a record in itself, historically, of how we've thought about each other. And so I so strongly believe in that. I came at the time to the UAE at the time when I think STEM was very strong, because the UAE was building its kind of economy, and I was always outnumbered and outvoiced by engineers and mathematicians and computer scientists and so on. But I think it will become clear that the kind of digital literacy that you're talking about, the literacy, the work that's required to be hopeful, Bakhita, and just the ability to understand takes a lot of work, and that work is something that we need to instruct our next generations of students in. And I do think that we're in a privileged position, and for that reason, all the more responsible. So on that note, thank you, Michael. I just would like to thank my guests this afternoon, the Executive Director of the Manara Center for Coexistence and Dialogue, Bakhita Alremeithi. Thank you so much for coming all the way.
It's an absolute honor.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us. And of course, my colleague and cherished friend, Dr. Michael Mallory, Program Director, and our alumna, Nauren Asif, who will come back to us and tell us what she's learned after her master's, hopefully, experience very soon again. To all our listeners and audience, thank you very much for joining us for another chapter of UOWD On Air, and stay tuned for more exciting episodes.